it's Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to be continuing our discussion about finding joy on the change grid. So where does happiness live and how does happiness change the way it expresses itself depending on where we are on the change grid, etc. In recent weeks, we've also been looking at different models of happiness to see how they overlay. As I said before I started the recording, today's call is going to be a bit short. I need to move on to a formal presentation I'm supposed to do at 10:30 my time. So we only have a half hour today. And so I was getting ready. I noticed that when we first started doing these calls almost 2 years ago, there was a lot of diagrams we were looking at that we were trying to integrate, see if they overlaid, and some did and some didn't. And now my screen's decided to fade. There it is. So I thought it could be interesting just to kind of look at some of these and look at the words they're using to describe whatever this happiness kind of thing is really all about. So we'll get to these in just a second, but to bring everybody up to speed, scroll, scroll, scroll. These, I think, were all about the different emotions people were experiencing, but I just need a composite change grid. What we seem to have decided up to this point, and you guys feel free to add in or correct anything that I'm saying, is that happiness as a true state of being is very different than happiness as a response in a given set of circumstances. In fact, the way that we characterize happiness encountered under a given set of circumstances may or may not match what we consider happiness as a state of being. So last time around, we were kind of saying like, well, if you really look at what happiness is connected to, it's connected to things like achievement, it's connected to things like really solid relationships. There were several factors. I could scroll further and remind everyone of those list of factors, but they all pretty much lived slightly out-grid. Most inside of the green circle, some between the green circle and the red circle as far as balance is concerned, but certainly not in the danger zone. So we kind of said people that tend to live in this somewhat out-grid kind of area, or maybe even more specifically as an amiable driver, they seem to be very happy about what they're doing, they're accomplishing, they're goal-oriented, they're achieving, etc. But we said, well, you know, people that are slightly up-grid will describe themselves as being happy. And the example that we used was that roller coaster. So you get off of a roller coaster, everyone's smiling, jumping up and down. They're really elated and all those good sorts of things. But we were trying to wonder, where does that happiness come from? And on the one hand, it was that you saw you had the ability to accomplish something, you survived. So maybe there was a bit of an out-grid maneuver that the experience in the roller coaster ended up creating. But the other thing is that you were able to avoid pain. You were able to avoid, a well-engineered roller coaster is supposed to make you feel as though things are totally out of control, even though intellectually you know that it has been engineered with safety as its primary objective. Nevertheless, you feel like you got away with it. You feel like you escaped the predator. You feel like you won the little battle. So is that really happiness? Or is that a sense of relief that you are experiencing, and it happened to be accompanied by these positive sorts of feelings? So thoughts about that before I go on to the other one. So is that truly happiness? Or is that more of a response to avoiding something, surviving something, whatever? Thoughts about that?
So I see that Pam said that she couldn't find her mute button or unmute button.
Oh, really? Just 1 second, Pam. Let
Yeah.
me slide this over here. Couldn't find your unmute button. Huh. Could be on your headset. Could be just one of the controls that you have. But right now, let me see. If I promote you to a panelist, can I then ask you to unmute? Let's see if that does anything. Oh, you're unmuted. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Sorry to interrupt, but thanks for bringing me on.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. You know, this call is all about the circle showing its brilliance. So we,
Exactly.
we certainly don't want to mute you.
Yeah, miss
So
you, Pam.
yeah, yeah.
But it sounds like to me what we've been talking about thus far in the way that you described it, it sounds like a response for sure. Like when you think
Mhm,
about like the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right? So, you
mhm,
know, intrinsically you feel that, or extrinsically you see something saying, oh yeah, this looks like it will make me happy. It seems like it will be fun.
mhm,
But the experience of that intrinsically may be uniquely different.
mhm. Yep. And how would you guys then blend in the ratio of ability to challenge up there? I mean, you know, we had said that people that are in this area of the change grid could also be thrill seekers. But I'm wondering how many thrill seekers who believe they have an ability of only a 5 would go after a challenge of a 10. Because there's a board, you know, I've never thought that thrill seekers were stupid. They might be a little crazy, but I don't think that they um, would tackle something that was twice as hard. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
No,
Yeah, well,
no.
Shags is saying, like, have you seen the TV shows or movies Jackass? Yeah, but he's doing something, you know, because he really does have psychological problems. I
Yes,
think
he
we could all
does.
agree on that. But, you know, he's doing it to make the money. So he's anticipating. In fact, I saw one interview of him. It's been a few years now, but he was talking about how many bones he's broken, how many times he's been in the
Hmm.
hospital, how many surgeries he's had. Uh, and you know, I am also thinking about the people like the Flying Walindas or
Oh,
Evil
yeah.
Knievel. You know,
Hmm.
these guys were doing their very best to make their audiences feel as though they were in a completely out of control situation. But what do we know is really the truth? Um,
Yeah.
it might be crazy, but we know they did whatever they could do to be fully prepared to do whatever. So that's what I'm thinking. Like the Carl Walindas of the world might have viewed their ability as being, you know, a 9, a 10, or an 11. And so they were out there tackling a 9 or a 10 or an 11. So maybe that's more of an outgrid kind of a thing because of the amount of preparation they had done.
Right. And plus, too, I just think, if you think about the human systems itself, is highly adaptable. So we can learn to be out there. The
Yeah,
real key becomes, okay, if we're up grid and out grid and we're staying there, what is the consequence of that?
yeah,
Because there is an energy consequence that could take a toll on the body. That's why emotions aren't meant to be long lasting. They're literally meant to be short term effects.
right. So they're giving you a message in the moment that could be vital for whatever you choose to do next. Yeah, I mean, well, and so let's kind of look at this. Have you guys ever done anything like bungee jumping or hang gliding or parasailing?
I tried parasailing.
Okay, parasailing. Well, Linda's a bit of a thrill seeker, so she's done those things. Now, the person who is trying, and of course, Pam has done all those things, haven't you, Pam?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I stay close to the ground. Gravity's because the Earth sucks. I just,
there it is. The earth sucks. I love it. Um, so when I think about that situation, certainly the first time someone does one of those treetop courses or they're doing some bungee jumping or whatever it is, if they've never done it before, then how high could they possibly rate their ability? I mean, they've never done it before. So
Hmm.
would you anticipate they'd rate their ability to do it, to survive it, whatever doing it means? I guess doing it means surviving it.
Hmm.
They've not done it before, so they don't have any experience. So they certainly um, must frame their ability in a like the mindset that, well, how much ability do I have to have? You know, they're going to push me off the edge. So I don't know that ability is really involved in all this kind of thing. So is it all about faith? That they have faith in the equipment, they have faith in the operators that are doing it, and so they perceive their ability in a bit higher way, but nevertheless, what must they perceive the challenge to be? You're bungee jumping.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think? At least a 10, 11?
I would say, yeah, 10.
All right. I mean, it's up there. And so that means you're either going to flat out as a driven expressive or as an expressive driver. So now, again, in that moment, are you feeling happy about the activity itself? Or are you happy that you survived it or overcame it, conquered it, whatever the case may be?
I was happy to come down. Like I've always had autoimmune issues, and so my balance is always off. So I did it as a way of like
Mhm,
training myself. I'm comfortable with calculated risks. Like bungee jumping would be too much of a stretch for me,
mhm,
even as
mhm.
much as I fly.
Fun.
Like it's 17 hours to fly back to South Africa, right? So when
Yeah.
I'm off the plane, it
Mhm.
takes time for my ears to get settled from the pin and all of that. So I was glad to get down on the ground. I didn't enjoy it going up. Once I was in the air, I kind of got settled in my own self. Like,
Mhm.
oh, this is okay. But I was very glad it was over.
Yeah, exactly. So where would you have been on the grid? How would you have rated your ability and your challenge?
I would say my ability was I rated it rather low on the low side, so be lower than a 6. So I would say between a 3 and 4 or somewhere, and the challenge was definitely up at a 10
All right, and so that would have
because I
put
kept
you,
looking up, and then once you're up and you're looking down, you're like, oh, that definitely changes your perspective.
yeah, literally, exactly. Okay, well,
But is it, T, can I ask a question though?
please, please do.
Is the challenge, when you're thinking about something like that, is the challenge about, well, I guess maybe you asked this, but I'm not sure I'm clear on it. Is my challenge the ability to survive it? Because like when you go parasailing, I seem to remember them saying, I was afraid. Oh no,
Mhm.
this is gonna be great. And I remember the tour guide saying, can you sit? And I
Mhm.
say, yeah, I mean, of course I can sit. And it's like, okay, well then you can do this.
Yeah,
So the going up is that. So the challenge of sitting is nothing, right?
right. So I guess it's more about the challenge of surviving it or
Yeah.
see, the
Yeah.
thing about parasailing is that you're going to be up there for several minutes. That's the whole point is that once you're up there, you should be able to mellow out to really look around and appreciate what you're seeing and take a few snapshots. And then I would imagine it really doesn't get tense again until you're starting to figure out how do you get off of this thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Plus, when
So,
you're up that high, yeah, remember you have some adrenaline going.
right,
And
right.
Yeah.
so your capacity to really balance that sensory that's going on, that sensory sensation, you're not thinking a whole lot up there, right? Like logical reasoning, when you have cortisol and adrenaline going, you really have to feel the moment. And that's what I was trying to do. But again, once
Right.
I looked up and then once I was up and I started to look down, all of these things just was piling on sensory kind of data a little bit too much.
Right. Interesting. And so again, it still feels like we're in a situation on the change grid where perceived ability, at least in the example you gave, Brian, and at the beginning and at the end of the experience that Pam is sharing, you might have perceived your ability as being moderate to moderately low.
Right.
And the challenge is definitely up there. So Pam, once you were up in the air, how did your experience change?
It was, well, for me, I remember thinking, this is fabulous, this is cool, and there's something to look at, and oh my gosh, this is great. And
Mhm.
even on the idea of like getting down, I mean, I think there probably was a little bit of heightened
Right.
tension or anxiety. Like, I hope I'm the one that does it right.
Yeah.
But it's a very different experience from like bungee jumping. Seems like you're not going for the view.
Well,
Mhm.
You're going,
exactly right. That's what I was thinking. Like, maybe parasailing is more of an experience that you're having, and bungee jumping is more of an event that you're kind of,
yeah, yeah.
exposing yourself to for whatever reasons. Now, I imagine if you have bungee jumped before, and you've parasailed before, well, now you might be looking for, I want a bigger jump, or I want a longer ride, or maybe go from parasailing to hang gliding because you suddenly lost all intelligence. So, so maybe that's when you're going like, no, I survived it. I learned a little bit about it. I've had the experience. So my perceived ability has gone up. And that means it's going to take something a little bit more challenging in order to keep you in a place where you find that experience engaging enough, rewarding enough to fork out the money to have the experience.
Right. Plus it changes the context, right?
Yeah.
So, the context shift itself will shift your perspective. And that adds another element to, how you're going to possibly experience things.
Right.
Well, and you're dependent on other people, like the paragliding is sit and other people do for you and they take you around and then they'll bring you back down. It feels like hang gliding or even jumping out of a plane. Like, okay, I can step forward. So that's easy to do.
Yeah.
But then the whole thing of, will I pull my parachute at the right time? Am I doing
That's
the
right.
right things?
Right. Will it do what it's supposed to do? Why did I even think about doing this? But then you find that people who have made, dozens of jumps, hundreds of jumps, and they must have a very different mindset around it. In fact, I wonder if at a certain point in time, they just go like, it's not particularly challenging. Because
Yeah.
we know our thing, we pack our own parachutes, so we know it's done properly and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, Karen had a friend like that who
That's
was
a good point that Pam made about that depending on others. I remember when I first came to the United States, then I was in Seattle and I went skiing for the first time.
Yeah.
That was a disaster.
Right.
They teach you on this like bunny slope thing and then put you on the tallest hill. It seems like I could not get out to the ski lift.
Yeah, so you went around for another ride. It's scary to go backwards down the mountain.
I thought you could go back around because the way they showed you is you put your poles down and that gives you a little nudge as you
jump off. Right.
Well, my poles dropped, and so I didn't scoop myself off quick enough. So I'm thinking you can go back around. So now I passed the ground going, and they were coaching me to jump out.
Right. And sooner or later, they grabbed you and yanked you off the chair.
Right? Exactly what they had to do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so, Shags, what were you saying? Go right ahead.
Said Karen had a friend who was a a jump instructor.
Oh.
And yeah, he thought absolutely nothing of it until the one time his parachute failed.
Oh, no.
And that was the end.
Oh, yeah. No, see, there is an element of tempting fate when you're doing anything like that, which gets me to my next question. And there it is, because Earth sucks, right? So, Pam, this is a question for you. Those of you who don't know, Pam has a background in law enforcement. And so, Pam, I was always wondering, when an officer gets out of the academy, gets onto the force, goes on patrol or whatever, what does that feel like experientially? Is that I know you're trained, but perceived ability versus perceived challenge in that moment?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was thinking the same thing as you're talking about this, like and eventually as you go, so those early days, even though you've been trained for it, in real world, suddenly, well, I think there's two schools of that, because me being wired how I am, I knew I could do things, but I wasn't sure I could do things. And so my perceived ability, might have been in different places in those early days. And then I was just thinking about those days that you would just suit up and you'd put on all this stuff that's, pretty important stuff as you, go out with a gun on your hip and do all those kinds and put on your vest and do all those kinds of things but it was really just living in the middle. It wasn't like I was panicked every time I put on that stuff and like, I hope it goes well today.
Right. And so do you remember the early on, like one of your first encounters that was a little bit more putting your skills to the test? And where that might have put you on the grid?
Yeah, I would think that, I know one time, my ability, I went into it thinking my ability was a 10. I'll just say, easily a 10.
Yeah.
And the challenge was pretty high too, because it was a domestic violence thing,
Yep.
and going after somebody. And then when the guy picked me up and started spinning me above my head, my perceptibility dropped down quite a bit. So I managed to get out of it okay. But
Yeah.
it was one of those things that it changes because humans are dynamic. So
Yeah,
things
right.
change as you go along. But I also think that in that a lot of the mindset is there, because the reality of this, and so I had to put my ability back up again so I could get out of the situation. Because if I played victim, or I
Mhm.
thought my ability to get out of this is really bad, then who knows
Yep.
what could happen.
Did you ever have to fire your weapon in the line of duty?
I did not.
Because I've always wondered, like, what must that feel like when you are using, a deadly weapon, and you're in a situation where you have to do, that's the choice that remains for you. Because it was going like, that's got to put you very far up grid. Well, a very high level of challenge, but again, that perceived level of ability should hopefully trigger in so that the skills that you've mastered on the firing range and things like that actually serve you well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I never did. And I don't know if it's the nature of Ann Arbor or maybe just the nature of human beings. And, they've always been violence and nutty people.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But I never had that, and didn't have to do too much unholstering, but a handful of times, and you really do have to, the mindset of your ability to be able to pull this off, because now you've got your gun out.
Yeah.
You need to be able to do something with it. So you can't afford to have your perceived ability be any lower than
Right, exactly. I lived in Ann Arbor for 9 years, and I don't remember anything that was newsworthy enough to say, like, something non-collegiate was actually going on in Ann Arbor. But you got to believe there was all kinds of crime happening right and left. In fact, the biggest thing I remember was when someone, I forget her name, she jumped off of the bell tower. Forget that. But yeah, I went like, well, so that's a suicide thing, and that's on campus. So I'm sure the police were still called because it was
we still go. Yeah.
the nature of what it is. But yeah, anyway. Okay, anyhow, so I was kind of curious about that. And so I'm still left wondering whether or not there is an experience of true happiness that arises upgrid. If there is, I would wonder if it's confined to inside the green circle, because I do know that there are plenty of times when people with only a moderate level of ability will go after a moderate to a moderately high level of challenge and have a good old time doing it. So, and maybe that's about, racing your boat, or, you like a fast car. So you're going, but even then I wonder, no, maybe those people would rate their ability as higher. Okay, I'll give you one example. So one of the things that seems to be increasing in popularity is the axe throwing places. Do you guys have one of those in Ann Arbor? You guys got an axe throwing place in
I've
DC?
heard of them. I don't understand why they exist.
Talk about the cheapest business model there is. They basically build a wooden wall along one side. They divide it up into certain sections. So you got maybe 8, 10, 12 of these little sections with wooden walls between them. But we're talking about pallets, nothing gorgeous. And then there's a couple of targets, and they give you an axe, and you throw this axe trying to get to the center of it. And the way that they do it is that you lease the lane for an hour, and they charge you $20 or $25 per person to do that. Well, quite candidly, after the first 10 minutes of throwing that axe, my arm was shot. So there was, and you kind of go like, well, this ceased being fun several throws ago. So nevertheless, people are doing that. So I'm kind of going like, well, how did I perceive my ability at the time? I'd never done it before. So I would say my ability might have been moderate, 4 or 5 or whatever. I'd never thrown an axe before. But I thought like, well, how challenging could it possibly be? Of course, I'd like to at least hit the wall instead of just have it go flying into the floor. And so was I having fun in that moment? Perhaps me not so much, but it seemed like a lot of people around me who are also first timers seem to be having a good old jolly time. So maybe, just maybe, there is some sort of a stretch experience that we could say during that stretch experience, people could be genuinely having fun. Yeah.
Lumen, the first device.
Yeah, and so maybe, just maybe, there's that possibility. But I would think that anything between the green line and the red line, that is more about that thrill of surviving something that you had no business putting yourself in, or didn't really want to be in that spot
So
whatsoever.
that's like safety in the green circle, because I'm like reflecting on what Pam was describing. You know, as a law enforcement officer, you're going into situations and environment there's a lot of uncertainty. You have to,
Right.
and you can only account for so much of that in your conscious experience because it hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
if you go into one situation, all of a sudden, you know, you're trying to reconcile something and now you're above someone's head. That's a lot to deal with in emotion.
Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. Okay, so again, I think that the reason why I wanted to dwell on it a little bit longer was because one of the things that Diane and I talked about extensively was that happiness comes from either achieving something you desired or getting away from something you didn't desire. So that avoidance of pain can also make one happy. But I think that's a different experience of happiness than if you're out there, you know, having some fun and trying something new and different, like, you know, again, the good roller coaster, whatever it is, could very well be there. So I need to get to that call pretty pronto now, but on Thursday, I'd like to talk about this whole idea about, does true happiness exist down-grid? Does it go all the way down? Is it just inside the green circle and also on the left? And then we're going to get into adjective mapping. So with that, Shags chatted over to everybody a little link on Johnny Carson. That should be a good one. I'm imagining it's about axe throwing.
You remember that?
I do vaguely remember it because I'm always reminded of those people who are standing up against the wall and people are throwing knives and axes at them.
Yes, it lands right at the crotch.
Yeah. You just go like, okay,
Shadow on the wheel.
right. You just wondered. You
Oh,
just
God.
wonder. Yeah. Yeah.
The
Who
map
knows?
went on for 10 minutes.
Exactly. Okay. All right. So thanks everyone for joining in, and we'll pick up where we left off on Thursday. So bye for now, everybody. Take care.